I'm Evelyn, and I'm 48 years old. I never thought the day would come when my own daughter would turn against me. For most of my life, my daughter Lila was my reason for breathing. When her father, Daniel, passed away suddenly from a heart attack, she was only 10. I remember holding her that night as she cried in my arms, whispering that I'd never let anything hurt her again. From that moment, it was just the two of us against the world. I worked 2 jobs, often coming home exhausted, but Lila never complained. She'd sit beside me at the kitchen table, helping with dishes or just talking about her day. We had a bond that most mothers could only dream of, open, honest, full of laughter and love. When she grew older, I encouraged her to chase her dreams. She wanted to be a teacher, and I helped her through college, every tuition payment, every late-night phone call, every tear of frustration when exams piled up. I was her biggest cheerleader. I thought that love would always be enough to keep us close. Then she met Nathan. I remember the first time she brought him home, tall, polite, with that firm handshake that tries too hard to impress. He was nice enough, though something about his family felt distant. His parents were the kind of people who smiled for photographs but never really looked at you. I tried not to judge. After all, Lila was happy, and that's all that mattered. Their relationship moved fast. Within a year, they were engaged. I still remember the engagement dinner at Nathan's parents' house. It was elegant, too elegant, really, with crystal glasses and linen napkins that looked like they'd never been touched by real life. When Lila stood up to announce their engagement officially, I couldn't stop the tears from rolling down my cheeks. I was overwhelmed with pride and love. But as I dabbed my eyes, I caught sight of Nathan's mother, Sylvia, rolling hers. She whispered something to her husband, and they both smirked. I tried to ignore it, but a small pit formed in my stomach. I thought maybe I was just being sensitive, that grief and joy had mixed inside me in confusing ways. A few weeks later, one of my friends called out of the blue. She sounded cheerful, asking if I'd found a dress yet for the big day. I laughed awkwardly and asked what she meant. She said, "Lila's wedding, of course. I saw her post the date online next month." My heart stopped. Next month? I hadn't received an invitation, not even a mention of the date. Surely, there had been a mistake. Maybe Lila was still finalizing the guest list, or hadn't sent mine yet. Still, that pit in my stomach deepened. That evening, I called her, forcing a smile into my voice. "Sweetheart, your friend mentioned your wedding's coming up soon." I didn't realize it was so close. There was a pause on the other end. Then she sighed, her tone suddenly heavy. "Mom, there's something I need to tell you." I felt my throat tighten. "What is it, honey?" "Please don't be upset," she started. "But I don't think it's a good idea for you to come to the wedding." For a moment, I couldn't even process what she said. "What do you mean I can't come? I'm your mother, Lila." She hesitated, as if she'd rehearsed this conversation. "Nathan and I talked about it. His parents feel uncomfortable around you. They said you were emotional at the engagement dinner, and it made things awkward." I laughed nervously. "Emotional? Lila," I cried because I was happy for you. I wasn't trying to make anyone uncomfortable. "I know, Mom," she said softly. "But they think it's better to just keep things simple. They want the day to be peaceful." "Peaceful?" I repeated, my voice trembling. "You think I would ruin your peace?" "Mom, please," she whispered. "Don't make this harder. I love you, but I need everyone to get along that day. I just can't risk any drama." I was silent. For the first time in my life, words failed me. My daughter, my baby girl who once begged me to attend every school play and parent meeting, was now banning me from the most important day of her life. I wanted to shout, to demand an explanation, but I could hear the uncertainty in her voice. She wasn't saying this out of malice. She was saying it because someone had convinced her to. "Lila," I said quietly, "you're making a mistake. One day, you'll regret this." There was a long silence. Then she said, barely above a whisper, "I hope not, Mom." I really hope not. The line went dead, and I sat there. The phone still pressed to my ear, staring at nothing. My hands shook, and the walls around me suddenly felt smaller. I thought about all the sacrifices I'd made, the sleepless nights, the birthdays spent at work, the lunches I skipped so she could have what she needed. None of that seemed to matter now. I walked to her old room, still filled with pieces of her childhood, the posters on the wall, the old trophies, the photos of us smiling together. I ran my fingers over one picture of her at age 6, wearing a pink dress and holding my hand at a school fair. Her eyes were bright, full of trust and love. What had gone so wrong between then and now? How had I lost her so completely? That night, Lila called me not to invite me, but to tell me I wasn't welcome at her wedding. Hearing those words from my own daughter shattered me. After the call ended, I sat in silence for what felt like hours. The ticking of the clock on the wall became unbearable. I replayed every word Lila had said, every hesitation, every sigh, every excuse. My heart refused to believe it was real. The next morning, I woke up with swollen eyes and a dull ache in my chest. I tried convincing myself that maybe she'd call back, maybe she'd realize how cruel it was to exclude her own mother. But the phone stayed silent. Days turned into a week, and I heard nothing from her. I couldn't take the uncertainty anymore, so I drove to her apartment. I brought her favorite muffins from the bakery she loved as a child, hoping it would soften her mood. When she opened the door, she looked surprised and slightly uncomfortable. "Mom, what are you doing here?" she asked, her voice nervous, like she didn't want her neighbors to hear. "I just wanted to see you," I said, forcing a smile. "And to talk. You haven't called." She stepped aside reluctantly, letting me in. The apartment looked neat, modern, and impersonal, nothing like the cozy chaos of our old home. Nathan wasn't there, which gave me a small sense of relief. We sat on the couch, and I handed her the muffins. "Blueberry," I said softly. "Your favorite." She smiled faintly but didn't touch them. "Mom, I didn't mean to hurt you," she began. "It's just, things are complicated right now." "Complicated?" I repeated, my voice trembling. "Sweetheart, you're getting married. That's supposed to be joyful, not complicated. Why are you shutting me out?" She looked down at her hands. "Nathan's family thinks you don't like them. They said you made them feel judged." "Judged?" I was stunned. "I've barely spoken to them. How could they possibly think that?" She sighed. "Mom, at the engagement dinner, you cried during my speech." "Because I was proud of you," I protested. "Because I love you." "I know," she said quickly. "But Sylvia thought it was too much. She said it made everyone uncomfortable." I stared at her in disbelief. "Too much?" I was emotional, yes, but that's what mothers do, Lila. You're my daughter. Lila's eyes filled with tears. "Mom, please don't make me choose between you and them." Her words hit me like a slap. "Choose?" I whispered. "Is that what this is about?" She looked away. "Nathan's parents are helping with most of the wedding expenses. They've been under a lot of stress. I just want to keep the peace." I felt something inside me break. "So I'm being punished because I can't afford to buy you a fancy wedding?" "That's not what I meant," she said quickly, wiping her eyes. "I just want everyone to get along." "Lila," I said, my voice low and trembling. "I've loved you every single day of your life. I've sacrificed everything for you. Don't let anyone convince you that my love is something to be ashamed of." Tears rolled down her cheeks, but she stayed silent. It was like watching my little girl vanish before my eyes, replaced by a stranger who looked like her but spoke someone else's words. I stood up slowly, feeling my heart pounding in my chest. "If you really think my presence would ruin your wedding, I won't come. But don't think for a second it's because I don't care. It's because I love you too much to force myself where I'm not wanted." "Mom, please," she whispered, her voice shaking. "I just need some time." I nodded, trying to smile through the pain. "You take all the time you need, sweetheart. I'll always be here." I walked to the door, but before I stepped out, I turned back and said quietly, One day, you'll understand what this feels like to be left out of the most important day of your child's life. Her face twisted in guilt, but she didn't stop me. She just sat there, hugging herself, as if torn between two worlds. When I got home, I sat in the dark for hours. I couldn't eat. I couldn't sleep. My mind kept replaying our conversation, every word cutting deeper than the last. I remembered the nights I used to stay up late sewing her Halloween costumes, the mornings I walked her to school, holding her tiny hand. I remembered the time she cried over her first heartbreak, and I told her, "No matter who walks out on you, I never will." And now, it felt like she was the one, walking out on me. The days dragged by, and word spread among my friends that I wasn't attending the wedding. Some of them tried to comfort me, but their pity made it worse. "Maybe she'll change her mind," one of them said. I just nodded, pretending to believe it. But deep down, I knew things had changed forever. The bond we once shared was cracking, splintering under the pressure of other people's opinions and expectations. Still, I couldn't bring myself to hate her. She was my child, confused, manipulated perhaps, but still my little girl at heart. That night, I sat at my dining table with a cup of tea, staring at the invitation card I never received. I imagined what it might have looked like, her name written in gold letters beside Nathan's, the date, the venue, the words "together with their families." I realized with a hollow ache that I wasn't part of that together anymore. And that's when I realized my daughter had chosen her new family over me. I cried for days, wondering how I'd lost her so completely. Every morning, I'd wake up with my pillow damp from tears I didn't even remember shedding. The house felt emptier than ever. Everywhere I turned, there were reminders of her, the framed picture of her graduation on the mantel, the pink throw blanket she'd left behind when she moved out, the silly little ceramic mug she made for me in 4th grade that said, "Best mom ever." I couldn't bring myself to pack any of it away. It felt like erasing her, and I wasn't ready to do that. But grief has a strange way of transforming itself. One morning, after yet another sleepless night, I realized something I didn't want to be bitter. I didn't want to remember my daughter's wedding as the day I was excluded. I wanted to remember it as the day I still showed her love, even if she didn't want me there. That's when the idea of the gift came to me. I went up to the attic and pulled down an old wooden chest that Daniel had built years ago. It was a bit scratched and faded, but solid, much like me. I decided it would become my gift to Lila. Not something store-bought or showy, but something that told our story, mother and daughter, from beginning to now. I started gathering things. A photo from her first day of kindergarten, the tiny hospital bracelet from when she was born, her crayon drawings from elementary school, a dried daisy she had picked for me on Mother's Day when she was 7. Each item carried a memory, a piece of my heart. And then came the letters. I had written dozens of them over the years, little notes slipped into lunchboxes, letters I never sent during her teenage rebellions, and journal entries from nights when I was too afraid to tell her how much I missed her father. I compiled them all, adding new ones too, letters I wrote after our recent fight, confessing my pain, my confusion, and most of all, my unshaken love for her. I arranged everything carefully in the box, layering it like a timeline of our lives. At the bottom, I placed a framed photo of the 3 of us, me, Daniel, and baby Lila, smiling at the camera. I hadn't looked at that picture in years, but now it felt right to include it. When everything was finally inside, I lined the chest with lace, the same kind we'd used to trim her prom dress years ago. I tied a soft blue ribbon around the box, her favorite color since she was a child, and then I added a handwritten note on top. "For your new beginning, my darling. May you always remember where your story started. Love, Mom." I sat there, staring at it for a long time, running my hand over the wood grain. It wasn't fancy. It wasn't expensive. But it was everything I had to give. I knew she didn't want me at the wedding, I had accepted that. But she couldn't stop me from loving her. She couldn't stop me from giving her this final piece of myself. So, the next day, I went to her apartment. She wasn't home, but I left the box by her door with a small card attached. "To be opened on your wedding day." As I walked back to my car, I whispered a silent prayer. Please, God, let her understand what this means. The days leading up to the wedding were quiet. I tried to distract myself, cleaned the house, tended to the garden, watched old movies to drown the silence. But deep down, I was waiting. Waiting for a call, a text, anything. I imagined her opening the box, tears in her eyes as she read the letters. Maybe she'd call. Maybe she'd realize how much I loved her. But no call came. No text. No word at all. At first, I thought she might be busy. Weddings can be chaotic. But as the days turned into a week, that hope began to dim. I couldn't help wondering if she'd even received it. Maybe someone else had picked it up. Or maybe she'd seen it and just chosen to ignore it. One night, I drove by her apartment again. I told myself it was just to check if the box was still there. I parked a few houses down, my heart thudding in my chest. Through the dim light, I could see that the box was gone from her doorstep. Relief washed over me for a moment. She must have taken it inside. But then I noticed something that made my stomach twist. Her building's dumpster was overflowing, and on top of the pile was a familiar blue ribbon, frayed and half unraveled. I froze. I got out of the car slowly, my breath catching in my throat. I walked closer, praying I was wrong. But there it was, the wrapping paper I'd used. Torn and dirty. Lying in the trash. The box itself wasn't there, but seeing that ribbon was enough. Maybe she hadn't thrown the chest away. Maybe it had just come loose. I told myself that to keep from breaking completely. I stood there for a long time under the streetlight, tears blurring my vision. A part of me wanted to storm up to her door, demand to know what she'd done with it. But I didn't. I turned, got back into my car, and drove home in silence. If she wanted to erase me from her life, I wasn't going to beg to be remembered, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something about this wasn't right. And when days passed without a word, I began to suspect she never even saw it. The day of her wedding arrived, and I couldn't stop myself from driving to the venue. I woke up early that morning, heart heavy but restless. The sun streamed through my curtains, painting the room gold, the kind of morning that should have felt hopeful. But for me, it only reminded me of what I was missing. My daughter, my baby, was walking down the aisle, and I wasn't even supposed to be there to see it. I told myself I wasn't going to go. I told myself it would only make things worse. But no matter how much I tried to reason with myself, something inside me refused to stay still. I needed to see her, even if from afar, even if she never knew I was there. So I got dressed quietly. I put on a simple navy dress, one that Lila had once said made me look strong. I didn't wear makeup, my hands were trembling too much anyway. I just brushed my hair, took a deep breath, and whispered to my reflection, "You're only going to watch from a distance." The venue was an hour away. A countryside estate that looked like it was plucked straight from a magazine, white roses climbing the archways, fairy lights strung between oak trees, and a massive glass hall overlooking a lake. As I parked my old car near the edge of the property, I could already hear faint music and laughter drifting through the air. From where I sat, I could see the guests arriving, stepping out of luxury cars, their clothes gleaming, their smiles wide. I caught sight of Nathan greeting people at the entrance, looking proud and composed, and then, her, Lila, my breath caught in my throat. She was radiant, her white gown flowed like silk water, her veil delicate and shimmering in the sunlight. She looked every bit the bride I'd once dreamed she'd be. My heart swelled with love and pain all at once. I wanted to run to her, to tell her how beautiful she looked, but I stayed where I was, gripping the steering wheel until my knuckles turned white. The ceremony began shortly after. From the small hill where I parked, I had a partial view through the open garden gates. Guests turned their heads as she walked down the aisle on Nathan's arm, not her father's, not mine to give away. That realization stung like salt on an open wound. Still, I smiled through tears. She looked happy, and that was all I ever wanted for her. When the music faded and applause broke out, I sat back in my seat, pressing a trembling hand to my lips. "She did it," I whispered. "She's married." That should have been my moment to drive away. But then something caught my eye near the stage. Among the beautifully wrapped wedding gifts, sat a wooden chest with a familiar blue ribbon. My heart skipped a beat. It was my gift. I leaned forward, staring hard to be sure. Yes, it was mine. The same chest Daniel built. The same ribbon I'd tied with shaking hands. But why was it there, still unopened? Had she finally seen it and decided to display it, or had someone else put it out as decoration, not even realizing what it was? I couldn't tell, but I knew one thing I couldn't leave without finding out. My heart pounded as I stepped out of the car. I told myself I wouldn't go inside, that I'd just get close enough to see. My shoes crunched softly on the gravel as I walked toward the reception hall. The air was filled with laughter, music, and the clinking of champagne glasses. I stayed near the edge of the garden, behind a line of rose bushes, close enough to see the people inside through the tall glass walls. The room was breathtaking, chandeliers sparkled above, tables draped in ivory cloths, guests mingling with champagne in hand. And there, near the head table, was my daughter. Lila looked perfect, smiling, radiant, surrounded by people who adored her. She laughed easily, the way she used to when she was little. Seeing her like that brought both comfort and heartbreak. Then, I noticed Sylvia Nathan's mother standing by the gift table, gesturing toward the box. I couldn't hear what she was saying, but her expression told me enough. Her lips were tight, her brows furrowed, her voice sharp. Whoever she was talking to nodded and smirked. A pit formed in my stomach again. I moved closer, staying hidden behind one of the garden pillars. Through the open door, I caught a fragment of Sylvia's voice. Honestly, it's so tacky. Who gives a hand-me-down box as a wedding gift? The person beside her chuckled. Maybe she's trying to make her daughter feel guilty. Their words sliced through me. I wanted to burst in, defend myself. Tell them the truth that every inch of that box carried love, that it wasn't some cheap gesture. But I bit my tongue. This wasn't my moment. It was hers. I wouldn't ruin it. I lingered there for a while longer, unseen, watching the celebration unfold. Lila and Nathan shared their first dance under a shower of soft light. Guests cheered and clapped as they moved gracefully across the floor. My chest tightened with pride. She'd grown up so fast. But even in that moment, I couldn't take my eyes off the gift box. It sat there, gleaming softly under the lights, untouched. When the dancing ended, and people began to mingle again, I saw Lila glance at the box. Her expression flickered confusion, hesitation, something unreadable. She leaned toward Nathan, whispering something, but he only shrugged. Then, she looked around the room, her eyes scanning the crowd. For a brief second, I thought she might be looking for me. My pulse quickened. I took a small step back, hiding behind a nearby column. Maybe she'd recognized the box. Maybe she was realizing what it was. I prayed she would come closer, open it, and see what I had made for her. But before she could move, Sylvia walked over, placing a manicured hand on her shoulder. She whispered something into Lila's ear, and I saw my daughter's smile falter for just a moment before she nodded and looked away. I felt my stomach twist. I wanted to leave, but my feet wouldn't move. I had to know, had to see what happened to the gift. I told myself I'd stay just a little longer, just until I was sure. So I stepped back into the shadows, my breath shallow, my heart aching but determined. That's when I decided I wasn't leaving until I knew what they'd done with it. I slipped quietly into the back of the hall, unseen by most guests. My heart was hammering so hard that I was sure someone would hear it. The soft hum of music, laughter, and clinking glasses filled the air as I slipped through a side door, blending into the shadows of the grand reception hall. The scent of roses and champagne hung thickly, almost suffocating. I wasn't supposed to be there, but something stronger than fear kept me moving. A mother's need to know. The room was stunning, chandeliers like crystal waterfalls, tables draped in white silk, candles flickering like tiny stars. People moved gracefully, smiling, dancing, toasting to love and beginnings. I hid behind one of the tall drapes near the corner of the hall, close enough to hear everything but far enough to stay unnoticed. My eyes immediately searched for the box. It sat on a small table beside the stage, beautifully wrapped just as I'd left it, though the ribbon looked slightly loose now, like someone had tampered with it. Every so often, Sylvia's gaze would flick toward it, her mouth curling in distaste. I wanted to believe she hadn't said anything cruel about it, but knowing her, that was wishful thinking. I had only met her a handful of times, but each encounter left me with a cold chill. There was a sharpness to her smile, a quiet cruelty behind her polite words, and from the way she was watching that box, I knew she had something to say about it. I crouched slightly, pretending to fix my shoe when a waiter passed by, just to avoid being noticed. Then, I heard it, her voice, low and cutting. She sent that box like she's some kind of martyr. Sylvia muttered to a woman beside her. The woman chuckled softly. Well, at least she's not here to embarrass anyone. Can you imagine the scene she'd make? Sylvia laughed quietly, swirling her wine glass. I told Lila not to worry. Some people crave attention. Even when they're uninvited, they find a way to be part of the story. The words hit me like ice water. I wanted to burst out from behind the curtain, to scream that I hadn't done anything wrong, that all I ever wanted was to love my daughter and celebrate her happiness. But I stayed silent, gripping the fabric of the curtain so tightly it nearly tore in my hand. Then I heard something else, a softer voice. Lila's. Mom, please don't start, she whispered. My breath caught. I leaned closer. She's not even here, Lila, Sylvia said dismissively. You need to stop feeling guilty. She made her choices. Lila sighed. She's still my mother. Sylvia took a slow sip of her drink. She's your biological mother, yes, but she has a way of overstepping. You don't need that kind of chaos in your new life. I could almost see the conflict on my daughter's face just from the tone of her voice. She's not chaos, she's just emotional, Lila said softly. It's who she is. Exactly, Sylvia replied. And that's why she's not here. Those words sliced deeper than any knife. I'd been called many things in my life, poor, single, struggling, but chaos from the woman who barely knew me was unbearable. I wasn't chaos. I was the reason Lila had made it through everything. I had given her everything I could, even when I had nothing. I wanted to scream, but instead, I just stood there, trembling, my nails digging into my palms. As the speeches began, I shifted slightly to see the stage better. Nathan stood up first, thanking everyone for being there. He spoke about love, partnership, and the importance of family, words that stung like tiny needles. Family. The very thing I was being excluded from. Then Lila stood up. She was glowing, smiling nervously as she took the microphone. I just want to thank everyone who helped us make this day so special, she said. To Nathan's family, to all our friends, we're so grateful. She paused for a second, her eyes scanning the crowd. For a brief moment, I thought she might say my name. But she didn't. Instead, she said, and to those who couldn't be here today, you're in our hearts. It wasn't much, but it was something. My eyes welled up. At least she hadn't erased me completely. Then, as she placed the microphone down, her gaze flicked just for a moment toward the gift table. Her eyes lingered on the box, and I saw her brow furrow slightly. It was quick, but noticeable. She whispered something to Nathan, who looked toward the table too. Sylvia leaned forward, saying something to both of them. I couldn't hear it. But Lila's face turned pale. My heart raced. What were they saying? What were they planning? The guests began chatting again, laughter rising once more. But I could feel a shift in the air, subtle, tense. Lila seemed uneasy now, glancing back at the box every few minutes. Even Nathan seemed distracted. I wanted to move closer, but the fear of being caught kept me frozen where I stood. I could feel my pulse in my ears, each beat echoing with anxiety. Something was about to happen. I could sense it. Then, as the music started up again and people began to dance, Sylvia stood, walking purposefully toward the table where the gifts were displayed. She picked up my box and set it right in the center of the stage, next to the microphone. My stomach dropped. She smiled at the crowd, pretending to fix the tablecloth, but I knew that look, the satisfaction of someone about to create a spectacle. Lila's eyes widened slightly. She shook her head, saying something under her breath to Nathan, but Sylvia just waved her hand dismissively. My throat went dry. I didn't know what Sylvia was planning, but whatever it wasn't good. I stayed behind the curtain, frozen. My eyes locked on the stage. My heart screamed for me to run out there, to protect what little dignity I had left. But I waited because part of me needed to see how this would play out. Her eyes darted toward the box, and I knew something wasn't right. When the speeches ended, I tried to slip away, but fate had other plans. The reception hall was glowing with soft light now. The hum of music blending with laughter and clinking glasses. Guests were scattered around the tables, lost in conversation and dancing. I stood near the back, my body tense, ready to leave. I had seen enough. My daughter was happy, surrounded by people she loved and people who clearly didn't want me there. It was time to go. I turned to leave through the side exit, clutching my purse, when it happened. A small child, maybe 5 or 6 years old, ran across the dance floor, chasing a balloon. He tripped and bumped into the gift table with a loud crash. Everyone gasped as the table shook and several presents tumbled to the floor. My heart lurched when I saw the wooden chest, my chest slide forward and hit the ground with a dull thud. The lid popped open slightly. My breath caught. I froze in place as heads turned toward the commotion. From where I stood, I could see the lace lining peeking through the small gap. The memories inside the letters, the photos, the keepsakes, they were all right there, about to spill into a room full of strangers. Sylvia hurried forward, her heels clicking sharply against the floor. She crouched beside the chest, fussing over it as if it were her property. "Oh dear," she said with exaggerated concern. "What on earth is this thing doing here?" Several guests leaned closer, curious. I saw Lila rise from her seat, frowning. Nathan whispered something to her, but she brushed him off and made her way toward the stage. I couldn't move. My feet felt glued to the floor, my pulse hammering in my throat. This wasn't how I wanted to be seen. Not like this. Sylvia turned the box toward the crowd, her lips twisting into that polite, venomous smile. "I told you," she said softly, though her voice carried. "It's that old box her mother sent." Lila's brow furrowed. "Mom's?" she asked. Sylvia nodded, standing up slowly. "Yes, it was delivered here, apparently. Some sentimental thing." The guests exchanged awkward glances. A few murmured quietly. Lila sighed and reached for it, but Sylvia hesitated, her hand still resting on the lid. "You don't really want to open that here, do you? I'm sure it's personal." But then, someone in the crowd, maybe emboldened by curiosity, laughed and said, "Oh, come on, it's a wedding. Let's see what's inside." Others murmured in agreement. I wanted to scream for them to stop, to respect her privacy, to respect my gift. Before Lila could respond, Sylvia glanced up and her eyes met mine. For a brief moment, the entire world seemed to stop. Her smile faltered as recognition flashed in her face. Then she turned slightly, raising her voice just enough to make sure others heard. "Well," she said with mock sweetness, "why don't we let the giver open it herself?" The crowd followed her gaze. One by one, people turned and then Lila saw me. Time froze. Her mouth fell open slightly, her eyes wide with disbelief. "Mom?" she whispered. Her voice barely audible even in the sudden silence that had fallen over the room. I felt dozens of eyes on me. My skin burned, my knees weak. I didn't mean to." I started, but my voice cracked. Lila stepped forward, her face pale. "What are you doing here?" she asked, her voice trembling. "You said you wouldn't come." "I know," I said softly, clutching my purse like a lifeline. I wanted to make sure the gift got here safely. That's all." Sylvia crossed her arms, her smile returning. Sharper than ever. "How touching," she said. "Since you're here, maybe you'd like to show everyone what's in your mysterious box." A murmur rippled through the crowd, a mix of curiosity and discomfort. I could see Nathan looking uneasy, glancing between his wife and me. Lila's face flushed red, torn between embarrassment and confusion. "Mom," she said quietly, "maybe it's better if you just—" But Sylvia cut her off smoothly. "Oh no, dear. She came all this way. Let her have her moment." I looked at my daughter, my beautiful, heartbroken daughter, and I saw how lost she looked. I didn't want to make things worse for her, but I couldn't let Sylvia turn my love into a spectacle. I took a slow step forward, every eye following me. My legs felt heavy, but something in me, something maternal, protective, pushed me onward. I reached the stage. The wooden chest sat there, its ribbon hanging loose, its lid slightly open. I knelt down beside it and ran my fingers over the familiar grain of the wood. For a moment, it felt like I was touching every memory I'd ever shared with Lila. The room was silent. Lila whispered, "Mom, please." But I shook my head gently. "This isn't what I wanted," I said softly, my voice trembling. "But since we're here." I lifted the lid slowly. The faint scent of lavender drifted into the air, the sachet I'd tucked inside, just like I used to do in her drawers when she was little. Inside, the letters were stacked neatly, the photos arranged carefully in envelopes tied with ribbon. The audience leaned forward, curious, unsure what to expect. Sylvia tilted her head, feigning politeness but unable to hide her smirk. "Well, go on then," she said smoothly. Sylvia smirked and said, "Well, why don't you open it in front of everyone then?" My heart pounded as all eyes turned toward me. I could hear my pulse in my ears as I knelt on that stage, surrounded by strangers and judgment. My hands trembled as I reached for the wooden lid. Every instinct in my body screamed to run, to hide, but a different voice, softer, steadier, told me to stand my ground. I had spent my entire life loving my daughter. I would not let anyone twist that love into shame. I took a slow breath and lifted the lid completely. A soft hush fell over the room. Inside lay the pieces of a lifetime, folded letters tied with ribbons, faded photographs, old drawings, and tiny keepsakes. The faint scent of lavender drifted into the air, wrapping around me like a ghost of our past. I heard someone whisper, "Are those letters?" And another say, "It's beautiful." Sylvia stood to the side, her fake smile flickering as she realized the crowd's curiosity had turned to quiet awe. Lila stood frozen near the dance floor, her face pale, her eyes darting between me and the open box. "This," I said softly, my voice carrying across the room, "is what I wanted to give you, Lila." I reached in and pulled out the top letter, one written on hospital stationery, the ink slightly smudged with age. "This was the first letter I ever wrote you," I said, my throat tightening. "The day you were born." The audience was silent. I unfolded the letter with trembling fingers and began to read. "My dearest Lila, you're sleeping now. So small you fit in the crook of my arm. Your father is gone to get me soup, but I can't stop staring at you. I promise you, little one, I'll protect you for the rest of my life." My voice cracked, but I kept reading. "I don't know how I'll do this without him, but for you, I'll find a way. You'll never go hungry. You'll never feel unloved. You'll always have me." I swallowed hard and looked up. Several guests had their hands over their mouths. One woman dabbed her eyes with a napkin. The music had stopped, replaced by the heavy stillness of emotion. I placed the letter back and pulled out a small photo, Lila, maybe 5 years old, covered in flour, grinning at the camera while we baked cookies together. "This was the day you said you wanted to be a chef," I said with a soft laugh. "You burned the first batch, but you were so proud of yourself." A few people smiled gently. The tension in the room began to shift. What had started as an awkward scene was slowly turning into something else, something raw and real. I picked up another letter, one written in childish handwriting. "You wrote this to me when you were 7, I said, smiling faintly. "You were mad at me because I wouldn't let you stay up past your bedtime." A soft chuckle rippled through the crowd. Lila's eyes glistened as she stared at the letter, as if seeing her past unfold right in front of her. I read her note aloud. "Dear Mommy, I'm sorry I said I didn't love you. I was just mad. I love you all the way to the stars. P.S. I still think bedtime is dumb. Laughter filled the room, light but warm. Even Nathan cracked a smile. I felt tears slipping down my own cheeks now, but I didn't wipe them away. I reached for the last letter I had written, the one I'd added only weeks ago, after she told me not to come to her wedding. I opened it slowly. The handwriting was shaky, the paper slightly wrinkled from my tears. My darling Lila, if you're reading this, it means you've begun a new chapter of your life. I know I'm not there beside you, but please remember that no matter how far apart we are, my love has never left you. You'll make mistakes, you'll hurt and heal and grow. But through it all, you'll always have a home inside my heart. Love, Mom. By the time I finished, the room was silent again. Not awkwardly silent, reverently silent. I could feel the emotion thick in the air. People were holding their breath. Lila's hand went to her mouth. Her eyes shimmered with tears. She was fighting hard to hold back. I smiled weakly at her. You see, sweetheart, I didn't come here to cause trouble. I came because this box, I ran my hand across the lid, is everything we've been through. Every laugh, every tear, every sacrifice. I wanted you to have it. To remember that no matter what happens, you're loved. For a long moment, no one spoke. Then a man near the front clapped softly. Another followed. Soon, the entire room joined in, polite at first, then genuine, heartfelt applause that filled the hall like a wave. Lila looked overwhelmed, her lips trembling as she stared at me. I could see the conflict in her, guilt, love, confusion, all tangled together. I closed the lid gently and stood up, wiping at my cheeks. I'll go now, I said quietly. You deserve your day, Lila. I just wanted you to have this. I turned to step off the stage, but a cold voice cut through the air behind me. Sylvia. Well, that was touching, she said with a brittle smile. But maybe there's something else you should all know before we drown in sentimentality. The room went still again. I froze mid-step, my heart dropping into my stomach. Sylvia took a few deliberate steps forward, her heels echoing sharply on the polished floor. She looked at me with a glint of cruel satisfaction. This woman, she said loudly, shouldn't pretend to be someone she's not. Lila's brow furrowed. Sylvia. Stop, she said softly. What are you talking about? Sylvia ignored her. Her eyes were locked on me, predatory and unblinking. You all think this is some touching mother-daughter story, she continued, her tone dripping with false pity. But there's one tiny detail that Evelyn here forgot to mention. I felt my breath catch, my heart slamming in my chest. Sylvia's smile widened, sharp as a knife. But Sylvia's face twisted in fury, and that's when she said something that changed everything. You're not even her real mother, Sylvia blurted, her voice slicing through the air like glass. For a moment, I couldn't breathe. The sound of her words hung in the air, heavy and cruel, echoing against the walls of the reception hall. Every pair of eyes turned toward me. The applause that had once filled the room died instantly, replaced by stunned silence. Lila froze, her face drained of color. What are you talking about? She whispered, her voice trembling. I could barely move. My knees felt weak, my throat dry. My secret, the one I had promised to protect until Lila was ready, had just been torn from me in the most brutal way possible. Sylvia took a step forward, her expression smug. Oh, don't look so shocked, she said, her tone almost gleeful. Your husband's family had a right to know the truth, Lila. You were adopted. She's not your real mother. Gasps rippled through the room. I could see the confusion, the pity, the fascination in people's eyes. They were watching a car crash, unable to look away. Lila shook her head, stepping back. That's not true, she said faintly. Mom? My lips parted, but no words came out. My heart felt like it was cracking open. Sylvia crossed her arms, her voice cold and satisfied. Oh, it's very true. I saw the documents myself. Birth records, adoption papers, all neatly tucked away in a little file. Quite the secret to keep, don't you think? The room spun around me. I wanted to scream at her to stop, to shut up. But my voice failed me. My eyes found Lila's wide, wet, pleading for answers. Lila, I whispered. I was going to tell you. I swear I was. Her voice broke as she said, When, Mom? When were you going to tell me? After I had kids? After you died? The pain in her voice shattered me. I stepped forward, but she took a step back, her hands trembling. You lied to me my whole life? She said, her voice barely above a whisper. Tears streamed down my face. No, I didn't lie. I protected you. From what? She cried. From the truth? Sylvia stood off to the side now, watching with cruel satisfaction, pretending to sip her champagne like she hadn't just destroyed an entire family. I took another step forward, desperate to make her understand. You were abandoned at birth, Lila, I said, my voice cracking. Your birth mother couldn't take care of you. I found you tiny, helpless, unwanted. The moment I saw you, I knew you were mine. You may not share my blood, but you are my daughter. In every way that matters, you are mine. Lila's breath hitched. Her face twisted with pain and disbelief. You should have told me, she whispered. I know, I said, choking on my own tears. I wanted to so many times. But every time I looked at you, I saw how happy you were. I didn't want you to feel like you didn't belong. I wanted you to have a normal life, a normal childhood. I wanted you to feel safe. Nathan stepped forward, his face pale. Sylvia, that's enough, he said, his voice sharp for the first time. You've done enough. But Sylvia only shrugged, feigning innocence. I didn't do anything wrong. Families shouldn't have secrets. Lila turned to her, her eyes blazing. You had no right, she said through gritted teeth. That was my story, not yours. Sylvia faltered for the first time, surprised by her tone. Lila turned back to me, her tears falling freely now. Why didn't you trust me? She asked, her voice trembling. I reached for her hand, but she pulled away. Because I was afraid, I said, my words coming out in a sob. I was afraid you'd see me differently, that you'd stop loving me. I didn't think I could survive that. The guests stood frozen, unsure of what to do. Some looked away, embarrassed to be witnessing something so raw. Others watched with open curiosity. The DJ had stopped the music entirely now. The only sound in the hall was the muffled sobs from the back, someone crying quietly for me. Or for Lila, or maybe for both of us. Lila, I said softly, stepping closer. I didn't give birth to you, but I gave you everything else, my time, my heart, my life. You were the reason I got out of bed every morning. You're still the reason. Her lips quivered. I just need to think, she whispered. I can't. Before I could say another word, she turned and ran out of the hall, past the guests, through the open doors into the rain that had begun to fall outside. Lila! I shouted, my voice echoing through the silence. But she didn't look back. The room was still. My body shook as I tried to follow her, but my knees gave out. Nathan rushed forward and caught me before I fell. Go to her, I gasped, pushing him away. Please, go. He hesitated, then nodded and ran after her. Sylvia stood nearby, her expression unreadable now. You brought this on yourself, she murmured. I turned to her, my voice trembling with fury. No, I said, you brought this on all of us. She blinked, startled by the venom in my voice. I didn't wait to see her reaction. I pushed past her, my heels echoing against the marble floor as I ran outside. The rain was coming down harder now, soaking my dress, my hair, my skin. The cold didn't matter. All that mattered was finding my daughter, the child I had loved every single day of her life, no matter what the world thought. I ran across the garden, my vision blurred by tears and rain, calling her name, again and again into the storm. Lila ran out of the hall in tears, leaving the entire room in stunned silence. I ran after her, calling her name as rain began to fall. The night sky had turned a bruised shade of gray, clouds rolling low over the estate as thunder grumbled in the distance. My shoes slipped on the wet stone path, my breath coming in short, painful bursts. All I could see ahead were flashes of white, her wedding gown trailing through the storm like a ghost. "Lila!" I shouted again, my voice barely audible over the sound of the rain pounding against the earth. She didn't stop. Her shoulders were shaking, her veil soaked, clinging to her back. The sight tore me apart. By the time I caught up to her, she had stopped near the garden fountain, the one surrounded by hundreds of white roses. The flowers, once pristine, were now dripping and bent from the downpour. She stood there, trembling, her arms wrapped around herself, mascara streaking down her face. I slowed my steps, afraid to scare her further. "Lila," I said softly, the word barely escaping my lips. She turned around, and for a moment, I saw every stage of her life flash before me. The child who used to run into my arms after school, the teenager who argued about curfews, the young woman I had raised to be strong. But right now, she looked lost, completely broken. "Why didn't you tell me?" she cried, her voice raw, desperate. "Why did you let me believe something that wasn't true my entire life?" I took a shaky breath. "Because I wanted to protect you," I said. "I wanted you to grow up loved, not haunted by questions you weren't ready for." "You should have trusted me," she shouted, her voice echoing against the empty courtyard. "I had a right to know who I am." "I do trust you," I said quickly, tears mingling with the rain on my face. "But back then, I was scared. I thought if you knew, you'd see me differently, that you'd look at me and think I was a stranger. I couldn't bear that, Lila." She shook her head violently. "You don't get it. My entire life, every story you told me, every bedtime memory, I don't even know what was real anymore." "Everything was real," I said, stepping closer. "Every hug, every word, every sacrifice, all of it came from love. The only thing I ever kept from you was the pain I didn't want you to carry." Her breath came out in ragged gasps. "So, I'm not even your daughter?" I closed the distance between us, reaching for her hand even as she flinched away. "You are my daughter," I said firmly. "You may not have my blood, but you have my heart, and that's what makes you mine. I didn't need to give birth to you to love you, Lila. I just needed to find you." She stared at me, the storm reflecting in her tear-filled eyes. For a moment, neither of us spoke. The only sound was the relentless rain hitting the fountain behind her. "Finally," I whispered. "Do you want to know the truth? The whole truth?" She hesitated, then nodded weakly. "You were born to a young woman named Angela," I said softly. "She was barely 18. She had no money, no family support. When you were born, she left you at the hospital. I was volunteering there that day." Her breath caught. "You found me?" "Yes," I said, my voice trembling. "They were planning to send you into the system. But when I looked at you so tiny, so helpless, I felt something I can't explain. I had lost Daniel only a few months before, and my heart was shattered. But when I saw you, something in me healed. I knew you were meant to be mine." She covered her mouth, sobbing quietly. "I went through every legal process," I continued. "Every sleepless night, every interview, every test just to bring you home. And when I did, you stopped crying the moment I held you. It was like you knew me." Her shoulders shook as the storm raged. Around us. "You should have told me," she whispered again, her voice breaking. "I know," I said. "And I'm sorry. I thought I was protecting you. But I see now that I was protecting myself. I was scared you'd leave me." Her eyes softened slightly, though her expression was still full of pain. "How could you think I'd ever leave you?" I gave a weak smile. "Because you're strong. Because you deserve the truth. And because every mother, no matter how much she loves, fears the day her child won't need her anymore." For a long moment, neither of us spoke. The storm began to ease, the thunder fading into the distance. The only sound was the gentle patter of rain on the fountain's surface. Then, Lila stepped forward. Slowly, hesitantly, she reached out and touched my arm. Her fingers were cold, trembling. "I don't know how to feel," she whispered. "You don't have to know right now," I said softly. "You just have to know that I love you." That hasn't changed and it never will. She looked at me for a long moment, searching my face. Then, without warning, she stepped forward and threw her arms around me. The moment her body pressed against mine, I broke. I held her tightly, my tears mixing with hers, both of us sobbing in the rain. "I'm sorry," she whispered against my shoulder. "I'm so sorry, Mom." Hearing that word again, Mom shattered whatever was left of my restraint. I cradled her face in my hands, kissing her forehead like I did when she was a little girl. "I'm the one who's sorry," I whispered back, "for not trusting your heart." We stood there for a long time, just holding each other. The rain softened into a drizzle, the sky clearing slightly as if the storm itself had been waiting for this moment to pass. When we finally pulled apart, she looked at me with red, swollen eyes but a small, genuine smile. "I don't care who gave birth to me," she said softly. "You're my mother. You always will be." I brushed her wet hair away from her face and smiled through my tears. That's all I ever wanted to hear. And for the first time that night, the ache in my chest began to ease, replaced by something purer, something unbreakable. Then she hugged me for the first time in months, whispering, "I'm sorry, Mom." When we returned to the hall, the mood had completely changed. The rain had stopped by the time Lila and I walked back through the grand doors of the reception hall. The once lively music had faded, replaced by hushed whispers and uneasy glances. Guests who had been laughing an hour ago now stood in awkward silence, uncertain what to say or do. Our dresses were soaked, our hair dripping, but we didn't care. We walked side by side, hand in hand, and for the first time that day, I felt like her mother again. Sylvia was the first to notice us. Her face paled slightly, though she quickly tried to mask it with that same cold, brittle smile. She stood near the front, clutching her champagne flute as though it were a weapon. Nathan rushed to meet us, relief flooding his features as he looked at Lila. "Are you okay?" he asked, his voice trembling. Lila nodded weakly. "I will be," she said softly, glancing back at me. "But we need to talk." The guests began to murmur, shifting uncomfortably in their seats. I could feel their eyes darting between Sylvia and me, waiting for the next act in what must have felt like a twisted drama. I wanted to disappear, but this wasn't about me anymore. This was about my daughter finding her voice. Lila turned to face the crowd, her hand still gripping mine. Her wedding dress clung to her skin, her mascara smeared, but she had never looked stronger. "I'm sorry for the interruption," she began, her voice shaky but determined. "I know today wasn't supposed to go like this." Sylvia stepped forward, forcing a laugh. "Sweetheart, let's not make a scene. Everyone understands emotions are high." "Stop," Lila said sharply, cutting her off. "No. You've said enough." The room went still. Sylvia's eyes widened in disbelief, clearly unused to being spoken to that way. Lila took a deep breath and continued. "Yes, it's true. I'm adopted. My mom," she turned toward me, her voice softening. "She's not my biological mother, but she's the woman who raised me, loved me, and gave up everything to make sure I had a good life. She's the reason I'm standing here today." The crowd shifted, some gasping quietly, others nodding in understanding. Sylvia looked uneasy now. "Lila, no one's questioning that. I was only trying to what?" Lila interrupted again. "Humiliate her? Ruin my wedding? You did this because you wanted control, Sylvia, but this isn't your story to tell. It's mine." Nathan moved beside Lila, his expression unreadable. Then, to everyone's surprise, he put his arm around her and said firmly, "She's right." Sylvia blinked in shock. "Nathan?" He turned to his mother, his tone steady but hard. "You crossed a line. You humiliated my wife and disrespected the woman who raised her. That's not love, that's cruelty." A ripple of whispers spread through the crowd again. Sylvia's lips tightened, her composure beginning to crack. "I only wanted what's best for you both," she insisted. "No," Nathan said quietly. "You wanted what was best for you." Lila squeezed his hand, tears streaming down her face. "Mom," she said, turning back to me. "I'm so sorry." You didn't deserve any of this. I shook my head, unable to speak. My throat felt thick with emotion. Sweetheart, it's not your fault, I managed. None of this is. Lila reached for the microphone that had been used earlier for speeches. Her hand trembled slightly as she lifted it to her lips. I need to say something, she said, her voice echoing softly through the hall. Everyone turned toward her. Even the waiters paused. My mother didn't give birth to me, she began, her voice steady now. But she gave me life in every way that matters. When no one else wanted me, she chose me. She taught me how to love, how to fight, how to keep going when things got hard. Everything I am, every good thing came from her. I covered my mouth, trying to hold back the sob that escaped anyway. She made mistakes, Lila continued, her eyes finding mine. But she made them out of love. And I forgive her because she's my mom, and because I love her. The silence that followed was absolute, the kind that comes only when truth finally settles into a room. Then, slowly, one person began to clap. Then another. And another. Within seconds, the hall was filled with applause. Real applause. Not pity, not politeness, but respect. I stood there, shaking, tears streaming down my cheeks as the sound washed over me. Nathan smiled and took the microphone from her hand, his voice warm. And for what it's worth, he said, glancing my way, I'm honored to be part of this family now. Laughter rippled through the room, soft and genuine. Even some of Sylvia's friends clapped, avoiding her furious glare. Sylvia herself stood stiffly, her hands trembling, her face red with humiliation. This is ridiculous, she muttered, setting her glass down with a clink. You've all lost your minds. But no one responded. For the first time that night, her words carried no power. Lila turned to her, her voice calm but unyielding. You owe my mother an apology. Sylvia blinked. Excuse me? You heard me, Lila said firmly. You humiliated her in front of everyone. You owe her an apology. Sylvia's mouth opened, then closed again. The silence stretched. For a moment, I thought she might refuse, but under the weight of every eye in that hall, she lowered her gaze. I'm sorry, she said, through gritted teeth. I didn't need her apology. I didn't even want it. But hearing it, especially in front of everyone, felt like reclaiming a small piece of the dignity she'd stolen. I nodded once, silently, and she looked away. Then Lila turned back to me. Her eyes were still full of tears, but her smile was bright and warm. Mom, she said, will you stay, please? I blinked, unsure I'd heard her right. Stay? She nodded. For the rest of the night. For the dance. For me. The crowd began to murmur again, this time with smiles. Someone even cheered softly. My heart swelled until I thought it might burst. I took a shaky step forward, my hand covering my mouth as tears streamed freely down my face. Of course, sweetheart, I whispered. Of course I'll stay. She smiled through her tears and held out her hand to me. Then come dance with me, Mom. Then, to my shock, she said, Mom, will you stay and dance with me? The band began playing softly, and I stepped onto the floor with her. The crowd parted around us like a quiet tide, creating a circle in the middle of the shining dance floor. The lights dimmed, and a soft, melodic tune filled the room, not the upbeat wedding songs from earlier, but something slower, gentler. It felt like the kind of song you only play when words aren't enough anymore. Lila took my hand. Her palm was trembling, just like mine. We moved together, uncertain at first, two women who had loved each other all their lives but were learning, in this very moment, to begin again. The music swelled, and the world seemed to fall away. I could feel the warmth of her hand, the rhythm of her breathing, and I thought of the countless nights I had rocked her to sleep, humming softly until her eyelids fluttered shut. Now, here we were, mother and daughter, not broken, not perfect, but still standing. Guests watched in silence. Some smiled through tears, others held hands. Even Nathan stood off to the side, watching with quiet respect, his expression softening with every step we took. Lila leaned in close and whispered, I should never have pushed you away. Her words hit me like a wave. I felt my throat tighten, but I smiled through it. You didn't push me away, I said quietly. You just needed to find your own path. I was always right here waiting. She let out a shaky laugh. I didn't realize how much I needed you until tonight. I looked into her eyes, seeing the little girl she used to be, the one who used to twirl around our living room pretending she was a bride, wearing a towel on her head for a veil. You've always needed me, I said softly. And I've always needed you too. The song drifted through the hall, wrapping around us like a gentle memory. For a moment, it felt like we were the only two people in the world. As we moved, I caught a glimpse of Sylvia standing at the edge of the crowd. Her expression had softened, the sharpness gone, replaced by something almost human. Regret, maybe. Or realization. I didn't know, and I didn't care. All that mattered was the woman in my arms. When the song reached its bridge, Lila rested her head on my shoulder. Do you forgive me? She whispered. I closed my eyes. There's nothing to forgive, sweetheart. We both made mistakes, but love makes room for them. She nodded against my shoulder, and I felt her body relax, the tension she'd carried all night melting away. For the first time in so long, I felt peace settle in my chest. When the song ended, the room erupted in applause. Not the forced kind, but warm, heartfelt applause that came from people who had just witnessed something real. I looked around and saw strangers smiling at me, nodding in quiet admiration. Some even wiped away tears. Lila turned to face the guests, her hand still clutching mine. Thank you, she said, her voice trembling. I know this wasn't the wedding, if any of us expected, but it turned into something I'll never forget. Because tonight, I remembered who I am and where I come from. I felt my eyes well up again. She looked at me with a faint smile. And that's because of you, Mom. The audience clapped again, louder this time, and someone called out, You've got one amazing daughter. I laughed softly, wiping my cheeks. I know, I whispered. I really do. The DJ smiled and leaned into the microphone. All right, folks. Let's keep that love going, everyone. Join them on the dance floor. Couples began to rise, friends, family, even a few strangers filling the space around us. Nathan walked up to Lila and gave her a soft, understanding look. May I? He asked. She smiled and nodded, placing her hand in his. Before they began to dance, she turned back to me. Don't go far, she said playfully. I wouldn't dream of it, I said, stepping aside to watch. As they danced, I found myself standing beside Sylvia. She was quiet for a long time before finally saying, She looks happy. I didn't look at her. She is, I said simply. Sylvia sighed, setting her glass down. I didn't mean for things to go that far. I just wanted her to have the perfect day. I glanced at her then, my voice calm but steady. There's no such thing as a perfect day. Just honest ones. And this, as messy as it was real. She nodded slowly, shame flickering in her eyes. You're right, she said quietly. I'm sorry, Evelyn. I nodded back, not to absolve her, but to close the wound she had opened. It's over, I said softly. Let's leave it there. The music changed again, something livelier this time. Lila laughed as Nathan spun her around, her dress catching the light like ripples of silk. For the first time that night, she looked completely free. I felt a warmth spread through my chest. Maybe this was what healing looked like, not dramatic forgiveness, not grand gestures, but small, quiet moments of love reclaiming its space. A little later, Lila came running back to me, breathless and smiling. Come on, Mom, she said. Dance with us. I laughed and shook my head. Oh, sweetheart, I think my dancing days are over. Then sway with me, she insisted, pulling me by the hand. And so I did. We stood together again, her hand in mine, her head on my shoulder, swaying to the rhythm of laughter, music, and love. The lights above us sparkled like tiny stars, reflecting in her eyes. I looked down at her and whispered, I'm proud of you. She smiled softly. I know. The moment felt endless, a perfect pause in time. I wished I could freeze it forever. As the song faded, I noticed the wooden box still sitting at the corner of the stage. Its ribbon was loosened, its lid slightly ajar. Something about it caught my eye, almost like it was waiting for one last chapter to be discovered. I smiled to myself, not realizing just how right I was. But little did I know, that box still held one last secret. Later that night, after the reception ended, Lila came to my car holding a small letter. The guests had gone home, the lights inside the hall were dim, and the last few notes of music had faded into silence. I was sitting alone in my car, hands resting on the steering wheel, staring out at the empty parking lot. My heart felt full, but heavy. It had been a night of chaos, truth, pain, and finally love. I thought everything had been said, everything revealed. But then I saw Lila walking toward me through the dark, still wearing her wedding dress, her shoes dangling from her fingers. Her hair was messy, her makeup smudged, but her smile, that smile, made her look like the little girl I'd raised. She tapped gently on the window, and I quickly wiped my eyes before rolling it down. "Hey," I said softly, "shouldn't you be with your husband?" She laughed a little, shaking her head. "He's saying goodbye to some of the guests. I wanted to talk to you before you left." I opened the door and stepped out into the cool night air. The faint scent of rain still lingered, the grass glistening under the parking lot lights. "You did beautifully tonight," I said, brushing a wet strand of hair from her cheek. "Your father would have been so proud." She smiled, tears forming again. "I found something," she said quietly, holding out a small, cream-colored envelope. "It was at the bottom of the box. I think you meant for me to find it later." My breath caught in my throat. I knew what it was the moment I saw it. The one letter I'd tucked beneath the velvet lining, unsure if I should include it at all. "You opened it?" I asked gently. "Not yet," she said. "I wanted to read it with you." My hands trembled as I took the envelope. It was addressed in my handwriting. "For Lila. When you're ready." I hesitated, then handed it back to her. "You should read it." She carefully tore it open, unfolding the slightly yellowed paper. The handwriting inside wasn't mine. It was softer, looped, unfamiliar to her but not to me. "It's from your birth mother," I whispered. Lila's eyes widened. You kept a letter from her?" I nodded slowly. "When I adopted you, I tried to find her not because I wanted to replace what you had, but because I thought someday you might want to know where you came from. She wrote this for you, but I didn't give it to you before because I didn't want it to confuse you. I thought it might hurt you more than help." Her hands shook as she lifted the letter closer to the dim light and began to read aloud. "My dearest Lila, if you're reading this, it means the woman who raised you, your mother, thought you were ready to know about me. I want you to know that giving you away was the hardest thing I ever did. I was young, scared, and alone. But the moment I saw you, I knew you deserved more than I could give. I prayed that somewhere out there, a woman would find you someone kind, strong, and full of love. And I see now that my prayer was answered." Lila's voice broke. She pressed a hand to her mouth, tears spilling down her cheeks. I put my hand on her shoulder, steadying her, but she kept reading through the tears. "You may not know me, but I have loved you from afar every day of my life. And I am grateful, so grateful that you found the mother you were meant to have. Please, don't ever doubt that you were wanted. You were chosen twice, once by me, when I brought you into this world, and once by her, when she made you her world." Lila stopped, unable to go on. Her body trembled with emotion. I took the letter gently from her hand and finished reading for her, my voice soft and breaking. "Be proud of who you are, Lila. You come from love, two kinds of it, and that makes you whole." "With all my heart, Angela." The night was still around us. Neither of us spoke for a long time. The only sound was the wind rustling through the trees and the distant hum of crickets. "Finally," Lila whispered. "She thanked you, she knew." I nodded, wiping at my tears. "Yes, I spoke to her once. She wanted you to have the best life possible." I told her I'd make sure of it. Lila looked at me, her eyes glistening. And you did. I smiled weakly. I tried. She folded the letter carefully and placed it back into the envelope, holding it against her heart. I think I needed this, she said. All of it, even the pain. It's like, the missing pieces finally make sense now. I reached out and tucked a strand of hair behind her ear, just as I used to when she was little. Life doesn't always give us clean beginnings, I said. Sometimes it gives us second chances instead. She smiled through her tears. You know what's strange? I don't feel angry anymore. Feel full. We stood there for a while, under the soft glow of the parking lot lights, the world quiet and calm around us. Lila leaned her head on my shoulder, the envelope still in her hand. Mom, she whispered. I'm really glad you came tonight. I let out a shaky laugh. Me too, sweetheart. Me too. The stars had begun to peek through the clouds again, their reflection glimmering faintly on the wet pavement. It felt like even the sky was trying to make peace. We stayed like that mother and daughter, no secrets left between us, breathing the same cool night air, our hearts finally beating in sync again. And for the first time in a long time, I felt like both of us were truly whole. In the weeks that followed, Lila visited me often. After that night, life began to quiet down again, not perfectly, not suddenly, but gently. The kind of quiet that follows a storm when everything is still trembling but finally safe. I'd wake up in the mornings and find my phone lighting up with messages from Lila. Good morning, Mom. Or, wanna grab lunch later? Each one felt like a small miracle. The first few visits were emotional. She'd sit at my kitchen table, the same one where she used to do her homework, and we'd talk for hours. Sometimes we laughed, sometimes we cried, and sometimes we just sat in silence, drinking tea and watching the light shift across the walls. Healing, I realized, wasn't about fixing what was broken. It was about learning to live with the cracks. One afternoon she came over with Nathan. I was nervous, unsure if he blamed me for the chaos at the wedding. But when he stepped through the door, he smiled warmly and said, I never got to thank you properly for raising such a strong woman. I laughed softly, still a little guarded. Well, she didn't make it easy. Lila elbowed him playfully. Neither did you, she said. From then on, Nathan came with her every Sunday. They'd bring groceries, help me around the house, and sometimes we'd cook together. Watching them laugh in my kitchen made something inside me ache, not with sadness, but with gratitude. After everything, my family was finding its rhythm again. Even Sylvia reached out eventually. I didn't expect that. One morning, I received a handwritten note in my mailbox. Evelyn, I owe you a real apology. What I did at the wedding was unforgivable. I let my pride and control get in the way of decency. You didn't deserve that. I hope, for Lila's sake, you can forgive me someday. Sylvia, I didn't respond right away. I didn't know if I could forgive her, not completely. But the fact that she tried meant something. People rarely apologize when it's inconvenient, and I could tell that writing that letter had cost her something. Weeks passed, the town settled back into its rhythm, and so did I. I began volunteering again at the community center, helping new mothers with childcare and paperwork. Funny, isn't it? After everything, I found myself surrounded by babies and young mothers again, as if life had looped back to where my story began. One day, as I was organizing supplies, I heard a voice behind me. Need any help, Mom? I turned and found Lila standing there, holding a tray of baked goods. What are you doing here? I laughed. She shrugged. Thought I'd join you. You've been doing so much good here, and I wanted to be part of it. The sight of her standing in that room, giving back, smiling, confident, made me realize how much she'd grown. Not just as a woman, but as a person who had faced the truth of her life, and still chosen love over bitterness. Afterward, we walked through the park together. The air was crisp, the leaves turning amber and gold. Lila held my arm like she used to when she was younger. Mom, she said quietly, I've been thinking a lot about that letter. From Angela. I nodded, my heart tightening. What about it? think I want to find out more about her someday, she said. Not to replace what we have nothing could, but just to know. I smiled softly. If that's what you want, I'll help you. Her eyes welled up. You'd be okay with that? Of course, I said. Knowing where you come from doesn't take away where you belong. She leaned her head on my shoulder. Thank you. A few days later, she brought over a photo album she was putting together. The cover was white, embossed with silver lettering that read, "Two mothers, one love." Inside were photos from her childhood, pictures of me and Daniel, moments from the wedding, even the one where I was standing on stage with the gift box open, tears on my face. And beside those, she'd placed the letter from Angela, carefully preserved in a plastic sleeve. I wanted to keep all of it, she said softly. The truth. The pain. The love. It's all part of who I am. I couldn't stop the tears. I reached across the table and took her hand. You have no idea how proud I am of you. She smiled through her own tears. You made me this way. Nathan joined us later, carrying a box of takeout, and the three of us sat on the couch eating noodles straight from the containers, laughing until our sides hurt. For the first time in years, my house felt alive again, full of warmth and chatter, like the home it used to be. Even Sylvia started coming by occasionally. The first time she visited, she brought flowers and a batch of cookies that tasted suspiciously store-bought. We both knew they were awful, but we smiled anyway. Over time, the sharpness between us faded. It didn't become friendship exactly, but something close to understanding. Every night after Lila left, I would sit on the porch with a cup of tea, looking at the stars and thinking about everything that had happened. The pain hadn't disappeared completely, it still lingered, quiet and familiar, but it had softened. It no longer controlled me. I had spent so many years trying to protect Lila from the truth, afraid that it would break us apart. But the truth had done the opposite. It had rebuilt us, stronger than before. Love, I realized, doesn't need perfection, it just needs presence. And for the first time since Daniel's death, I felt something I hadn't in years: peace. Then, one evening, as I was cleaning up after dinner, my phone rang. I glanced at the screen and smiled. It was Lila. I answered, teasing, "You're not tired of me yet?" Her voice on the other end trembled slightly. "Never. But, I need to tell you something." Something in her tone made me pause. "What's wrong?" She laughed softly, a sound between a sob and a giggle. "Nothing's wrong, Mom, it's just something big." I sat down slowly, my heart pounding. "You're scaring me. What is it?" There was a pause. Then her voice broke into a smile I could hear even through the phone. Then, one evening, she called with unexpected news that brought me to tears. Lila told me she was pregnant. For a moment, I couldn't speak. The words hung between us over the phone, fragile and beautiful, like a delicate thread connecting two hearts. My breath caught, and then I laughed, a sound that came out half sob, half joy. You're going to be a mother?" I whispered. She laughed too, her voice trembling with emotion. "Yes, Mom. Nathan and I found out last week. We wanted to tell you in person, but I couldn't wait any longer." I pressed a trembling hand over my mouth, trying to hold back the flood of tears. "Oh, sweetheart," I said, my voice breaking. "You have no idea how happy that makes me." Her voice softened. "I was nervous to tell you at first. Not because I thought you'd be upset, but because I wanted to tell you in the right way. I want you to be part of everything from the very beginning." I closed my eyes, letting her words sink in. "You mean that?" "Of course I mean it," she said quickly. "You're going to be there for every appointment, every ultrasound, every little thing. I want my baby to know you like I do." The tears came freely then. After everything we'd been through, the rejection, the pain, the truth, this moment felt like redemption. Like all the broken pieces had finally fallen into place to make something whole again. "I don't think I've ever been this happy," I said softly. She laughed through her own tears. "You're going to be a grandmother, Mom." Those words hit me harder than I expected, not with age, but with gratitude. A grandmother. I had almost missed her wedding. I had almost lost her entirely. But somehow, love had found its way back to us, stronger than before. We spent an hour talking that night, her voice full of hope and plans. She told me how she'd already started a list of baby names, how Nathan was reading parenting books, how they were both terrified and excited. I listened, smiling through tears, letting her excitement wash over me. When we finally hung up, I sat in the quiet of my kitchen, the clock ticking softly. The air felt lighter somehow, like even the house itself was breathing again. I looked around at the framed photos, the wedding invitation she'd finally given me after the fact, the wooden chest that now sat on a small table near the window. It was open, empty now, but not hollow. It had done its job. It had brought us back together. The next morning, I drove to her house. She greeted me at the door with a radiant smile and a glow I hadn't seen in her since childhood. Her eyes sparkled with life, with the promise of a future. She took my hand and placed it gently on her belly. "You can't feel anything yet," she said with a laugh. "But I wanted you to be the first to say hello." I swallowed hard, my eyes misting. "Hi, little one," I whispered. "This is your grandma. Been waiting a long time to meet you," Lila giggled, her voice thick with emotion. "I think they already love you." We spent that day together, talking about names, decorating ideas, and everything she wanted for her baby. She showed me a small room down the hall that she planned to turn into the nursery. The walls were bare for now, but her excitement made it easy to imagine soft pastels, tiny clothes, a crib by the window. "Will you help me decorate it?" she asked, her eyes hopeful. "Of course," I said instantly. "We'll make it perfect." She smiled and squeezed my hand. "I want you to make something special for the baby, like the memory box you made for me." I looked at her, speechless for a moment. "You really want that?" "I do," she said. "Because I want my child to grow up knowing that love can come from anywhere, not just from blood, but from choice. From the people who stay." I couldn't stop the tears this time. I pulled her into my arms, holding her close. "Oh, Lila," I whispered. "You have no idea how proud I am of you." We spent the next few weeks shopping for baby clothes, picking paint colors, and laughing over the tiniest things, whether to choose yellow or mint green. Which lullabies were the best. What kind of rocking chair she wanted. Sometimes Nathan joined us, watching fondly as we bickered playfully over details. Even Sylvia came by occasionally, quieter and softer now, almost humbled by everything that had happened. She'd bring food, sit quietly, and listen as Lila talked excitedly about the baby. Time, it seemed, was healing more than just our wounds. One afternoon, while helping paint the nursery, Lila opened the wooden box again. It now sat in the baby's room, carefully cleaned and polished, the lace and ribbon neatly folded inside. She placed it on a shelf above the crib. "I want this here," she said. "It's a reminder of where I come from and of everything love survived. To get here." I nodded, my throat tightening. "It's yours," I said softly. "Always has been." She smiled and turned back to the wall, her brush moving in smooth, steady strokes. The sunlight streamed through the window, catching the soft color of the paint and making the room glow. I watched her quietly, overwhelmed with pride. My daughter, once lost to me, now stronger than ever, was building her own story. Later, as I was leaving, she walked me to the door and hugged me tightly. "Thank you for never giving up on me," she whispered. I smiled through tears. "Thank you for finding your way back." That night, I lay in bed thinking about the years behind us, the laughter, the mistakes, the heartbreak, the forgiveness. It had all led to this moment. Love, I realized, doesn't always come in perfect shapes. Sometimes it comes bruised, patched together, and rebuilt from ashes. But it's still love, and it's still enough. I closed my eyes, picturing Lila holding her baby, the memory box glowing softly in the background, a symbol of everything we'd survived. My daughter had once banned me from her wedding, but in the end, love invited me back home. And as I held her in my arms, I knew our story had finally found its peace.